Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. Coming to you live after the Chargers' victory over the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football in overtime on the leg of Dustin Hopkins. So, got a lot to talk about in the biggest barn burner of the weekend. Like I said, we'll dive into everything. Joining me are my guys Tyler and Alex. Tyler, we'll start with you. You pulled a flu game tonight. By some miracle, you are here with us tonight. But in all seriousness, man, how's it going?
Yeah, absolute flu game, and I'm glad I got to sit through that. Almost got doubly sick watching it, but you feel better after a win.
Yeah, I would imagine that you kind of wish that you would have went to school after all instead of having to sit through and watch that entire game tonight.
Yeah, it would have been ignorance is bliss. Like, oh, they won 1916. Sweet. Must have been a pretty good defensive battle.
Which, in all fairness, it kind of was. Well, like I said, we'll get to everything. Alex is here as well, man. Alex, what's up? How you doing tonight?
That was one of the football games I have ever watched all time. It was one of them.
It was most certainly a football game. We can say that for sure.
Technically, it was indeed a football game. Technically, it was a Chargers victory. So here's the pink. But what the fuck?
Neither offense wanted to win that game. Obviously, first and foremost, huge shout out to Dustin Hopkins tonight, gunning through what he said was a pop after that first PAT. So it didn't seem like it was the same injury that was bothering him. I think this might be something different, but we'll obviously get to that. So, I'm sure we'll get to game balls down the road, but Dustin Hopkins, man, absolutely gutted it through. And for like the first time in my life, I think the Chargers won because of special teams. So I don't know, we'll talk about all of that, but special teams tonight was outstanding behind J.K. Scott, Jossier Taylor, and of course, Dustin Hopkins. So Alex, we'll start with you, man. Outside of the just kind of sheer boring way this game played out, what's your biggest takeaway from where the Chargers stand tonight after beating the Broncos 19-16 in overtime?
They're 4-2, I guess. This is like the weirdest 4-2 Chargers kind of team of all time. Because in a way you're sort of sitting here, and they reeled off 3 straight wins right after going 1-2. But I guess how they've gotten those wins hasn't necessarily been pretty, especially tonight. Definitely wanted to see more from the offense. Of course, the Broncos defense is, one of the top 5 defenses in the league by DVOA. You sort of expected them to get a boost getting Justin Simmons back as well. And they did get that. And of course, the Chargers, injuries and everything else on offense hurt them in this game. But I guess they got to win. It's hard with everything and how it played out tonight, even though the Chargers are 4-2 and they have plenty of time the rest of the season to get things together. This team isn't a playoff team right now. And I think that a lot can change between now and the end of the season. But they just have a quarterback that they paid $80 million to that got benched. Justin Herbert looked bad. Joe Lombardi looked bad. The injuries are just piling up at this point with Will Clapp and then Brendan Hymas and then Will Clapp coming back into the game. But this was a really tough one to watch.
Yeah, it was a tough one. I don't know if I'm ready to say that they're not a playoff team right now. I think we can say that they're not like a contender. I think the AFC is pretty clearly Chiefs and Bills, and then whatever is happening after that. But I still think that, coming off of this kind of victory, the offense certainly took a step back. They had played really well the last 2 weeks, but we knew that the offense was going to be in for a bit of a slog tonight. And I think none of us kind of pictured this. They didn't even test Patrick Surtain at all tonight, which I think was, I would have liked to see them at least, give Mike Williams a chance to make a play. But we knew that the offense was going to be in for a tough spot in this game. And then the news comes down that Corey Linsley is out. So I think if we knew heading into this game that Corey Linsley wasn't going to play and the defense and special teams was going to give them a win, I think we generally would have taken that. Although obviously, yes, the offense was not pretty tonight. The JC Jackson situation is going to loom over this team for the whole rest of the season and probably the next couple of seasons, which we can certainly dive into. But we needed to see the defense come out and have a dominant performance. And it wasn't that for the whole game, but for the second half, overtime, this defense was really, really good. They did everything they possibly could to, put the offense in better positions. And I think even if it's an ugly win, I still think you take this kind of performance, not 10 times out of 10, but you generally take this performance, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to win 10 times out of 10, then sure, I'll take whatever performance you give me.
Sure.
Yeah, the defense absolutely needed to show up today, and it really did take everyone. It wasn't just like, oh, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, and that's it. It was basically everyone that stepped up except for one particular corner. Otherwise, I mean, Kenneth Murray was making plays, Drew Tranquil, Jerry Tillery, Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day. Like, everyone was making plays, even though it wasn't completely perfect. They did about as good as they could have, especially with that interception by Herbert.
Mm-hmm.
I still think they're playoff contenders. I don't clearly it is the Bills at least as like the prime Super Bowl contender for the AFC. No question about that. But with the way the Chargers were at least able to play defense today, I really, really needed to see this from Brandon Staley because it was rough when the Texans move on you kind of at will and the Browns move on you basically at will. You start to have questions. And this one, yes, I know the Broncos are statistically a terrible, terrible offense that's missing several key players. But I was expecting the, floodgate game where all of a sudden the Broncos score 28, 31, whatever.
Yeah.
And the Chargers lose because they just could not keep up against an opposing defense as well. That's very good. So happy to see the defense pull through for Brandon Staley. Everyone showed up. Notre Dame's finest showed up today as well.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. In a game where the offense was like, there literally almost wasn't a bright spot on offense because everything just messed up at some point. But really happy to see this defense. And yeah, they're 4-2. How do I feel about them playing the Seahawks next week? I don't know, but who cares? They won tonight.
Yeah, I think next week, obviously, you're not playing the Broncos defense. So I think we could see a bit of a bounce back from the Chargers offense. But like Tyler is saying, I think, the Broncos essentially benched Melvin Gordon pretty quickly in this game, which I think was a surprise. But the run defense outside of a couple big Russell Wilson zone reads was really, really good. I'm trying to do quick math here in terms of yards per average, but total, it was 23 carries for 98 yards, 4.3 yards per carry. They only had 2 explosive runs given up, which I think, again, is something that you absolutely would take heading into this kind of game, given how they have struggled in the past few games. So like Tyler was saying, I think after the JC Jackson situation kind of played itself out tonight, the defense really settled in. And then they did some fantastic things with their designer blitz packages. Drew Tranquil, Derwin James, Kenneth Murray, all getting in on the action. Kyle Van Noy had some good reps as well. And then you get some good performances from Khalil Mack. I mean, Derwin James was much better. Asante Samuel Jr. was good down the stretch. Nasir Adderley had a couple good plays. So I think defensively they took a step forward today, even if, the Broncos are not great. But I mean, it was 10-0 after the first quarter and they ended up at 16 points. So defensively, I think tonight is a win for Brandon Staley's unit after not playing well at all over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, it's a win for them, and I think you look at what Drew Tranquil did tonight. Kenneth Murray even had a great game. Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day definitely deserve a lot of credit for what they were able to do in the run game as well. Khalil Mack, obviously, Derwin James, aside from the Derwin JC play that got the Broncos 3 more points at the end of the first half. Aside from that, I thought Derwin was very good as well. But yeah, obviously, I think that when you look at this defensive performance, I guess it's a question of whether or not the Broncos were bad, were the Chargers good. I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, considering what the Broncos were coming into this game. But the Chargers, had plenty of situations where, they could have folded, and then credit for the coaching staff making the decision to pull JC Jackson for Michael Davis, because that arguably won them the game. When you consider what Michael Davis was able to do on Cortland Sutton in the second half and in overtime. So, for what it's worth, that was a decision on defense that did flip the game. And so I do think Michael Davis, of course, deserves a lot of credit as well for someone who hasn't been getting defensive snaps regularly, at all these past couple weeks. For him to just come in and effectively be the team's CB1 on such short notice, I think was really impressive on his end. So overall, like, it was a real team effort on the defense. Aside from Khalil Mack and Derwin James, this is not a defense of stars at this point, right? It's just kind of, a bunch of guys who have obviously been on the Chargers for a while, some who have, come in through free agency and stuff, but this was a real grinded out effort definitely against this Broncos team. And I think from that perspective, I don't know how replicable this performance is going to be against, top 5 EPA quarterback Geno Smith and the Seattle Seahawks offense that's going to come in. I can only be terrified at the thought of what potentially DK Metcalf will do to J.C. Jackson. But for now, I do think this is a performance that gets the defense going a little bit in the right direction. How long that'll last, we'll see.
I'm very curious what they do with J.C. Jackson here. I'm curious what people in the chat think, because Nasir Adderley wasn't hurt. Like, they needed to make a switch. They tried to make a change in that game, because especially against the Browns in their running game. And so they did. JC technically has the excuse and has said as much. Like, we do know, or at least we assume, that he is 90%, as he said. Like, he is not perfectly healthy. There is a built-in excuse there. I don't know what you do, but right now it's not working with JC. I mean, I think we see him after the bye, to be completely honest. Now, is JC playing special teams? I don't know. That would be kind of insane for him to be playing special teams. But, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they do, but there is certainly a built-in excuse there. I'm curious what they do next week.
Yeah, like I said, this is going to loom large, right? Because I figured heading into today, like, Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf, back-to-back weeks, it's going to be a few jump balls, some contested catches, JC Jackson potentially, being able to get his hands on some passes. But I don't know what is happening. I really don't. We were all really excited about the JC Jackson signing. We all figured that he was going to be the cornerback that this team needed, but it's just like mental errors. Like, he's been a little slow here and there on some plays. Maybe that's a bit more of the injury, but you have no business getting beat by KJ Hamler in that situation tonight. Where the Broncos are pretty clearly trying to push the ball down the field. So this, I don't know, man. It's just busted coverages, and then, like, as soon as you sub JC out, the defense is amazing. Like, in this game, it just is. It's so puzzling. Obviously, like Alex is saying, credit to Michael Davis for staying ready in this kind of situation, being able to come in and play well. Cortland Sutton, really none of the Broncos receivers did much in the second half, but Cortland Sutton, 2 catches, 14 yards. Jerry Jeudy, he had 3 catches, 54 yards, but one of them was that 37-yard gain. KJ Hamler only had 2 catches, 44 yards. So again, this Broncos offense is not great. It's not in a rhythm. But Michael Davis came in and changed the game. It really did. And once he was able to come in and kind of settle down the secondary, they were able to kind of get after Russ, and they did that in a big way with all the designer packages. And Drew Tranquill is freaking incredible tonight.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Let's look at the box score for Drew Tranquill. We won't get the pressures for him. Arjun, if you're listening, or if you're even still awake, I'd love to know what the pressures were for Drew Tranquill. We have, let's see, 8 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits. Just sensational. And more than just someone who is asked to rush the passer, and he would rush the passer. Like, he was getting home, hitting home, and it was ferocious. That fourth quarter, I believe, sack was huge.
So, again, defense playing really, really, really well tonight. And we saw some good Jerry Tillery moments. Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson were great against the run. Otito had some good reps as well. So, again, defensively, this team played really, really well tonight. The offense tonight, man, looking at this box score, it's ugly. And I understand, like, I feel like we're able to be objective about Joe Lombardi. He's had 2 pretty good weeks in a row before today. Again, Broncos defense very good, but just looking at this box score, and I understand, like, the circumstances, right? No Corey Linsley, Will Clapp gets injured heading into the game, but Joshua Palmer, 9 catches for 57 yards on 12 targets. Austin Eckler, 10 catches, 47 yards on 16 targets. Gerald Everett, 5 catches, 29 yards on 7 targets. DeAndre Carter, 3 for 17. Like, this was the only kind of source of downfield passing attack tonight was Donald Parham, who looked good in limited action. But again, this was a bad Joe Lombardi day, and I feel like we can safely say that they were not prepared to play without Corey Linsley. And I understand you think he has a fever. You don't think he's going to miss this time, but it felt like after they scored the touchdown and got the field goal in the second quarter, they were just like, okay, like we're just going to dink and dunk and try and get down to the field. And it was bad. It was really, really bad tonight. Some of it was Justin Herbert for sure. He did not play a banner day himself, missing players on quite a few occasions, but it was just like stick left and right, or a screen pass to Palmer, or a screen pass to Eckler. It was frustrating to watch, man. It really was.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with this offense because, yes, it should all start with Joe Lombardi and absolutely with the play calls, sure, execution, sure. But, I mean, good God, all of a sudden you lose Joshua Kelly. At some point you lose Will Clapp. You already don't have Corey Linsley. You don't have Keenan Allen. You know, Herbert was rough today. There were 3 critical plays. Like 4th down, Everett sitting there wide open, missed them. You know, 3rd down, could have gotten it to one of Horvath or Everett. Missed him.
Xander was wide open too. That was like,
and he looked at him.
That was the best call from Lombardi all night long.
Right, which is frustrating, and maybe the tape looks different, but yeah, but there was just 3 holding penalties from Zion. I don't know how many penalties the Chargers ended up with, but that was brutal. They finally target Everett, and he gets a drop. There was 3 first down or false starts. Excuse me. There was, and Herbert was bad. Like Herbert, not bad. He survived, and I think he was fine. But there's certainly those errors there. It was a tough watch, man. And yeah, it starts with Lombardi, whether he wanted to play calling, execution, whatever. That was bad. That was as bad of a performance since, honestly, maybe the last time they played at Denver.
Oh, God. Really quickly before Alex jumps in here. Broncos ending up, this is just accepted penalties. This was much worse than it actually is. But Broncos had 10 penalties for 151 yards. Chargers had 9 for 89. Again, that's not counting the penalties that were declined or offsetting or whatever.
Didn't Damari Mathis have like 5 of those 10 penalties?
Yeah, he had 4 pass interference penalties himself. Yeah. So it was brutal.
Chargers offensive MVP right there.
Honestly.
Yeah. I think there's enough blame to go around for how the offense played today. For me, I would actually say that it starts with Justin Herbert, particularly over Joe Lombardi. You could kind of go either way on that one, but I just think Herbert, you know, we even talked about kind of some of the plays that Lombardi did open up in that 4th quarter, like the Xander Horvath one. There's, you know, a play where Justin Herbert that ended up in the Browning interception. Was that Browning who came down with that interception? Yeah, when Gerald Everett bobbled it, and Justin kind of threw that one into pretty much triple coverage, and DeAndre Carter is on the left side of the screen, completely wide open, and Herbert had looked that way prior. So just a weird Justin Herbert game. You know, for all the talk of primetime Herbert, it really just felt like Mike Williams getting, you know, completely taken off the face of the earth by Patrick Surtain, and that side of the field getting shut down as a whole just really messed this whole game up and what the offensive game plan was supposed to be for the Chargers. And I think Herbert was clearly rattled by that. I think Lombardi was clearly kind of rattled by that and sort of at a loss for what to do with all the, you know, stick concepts and everything else that the Chargers kind of tried. This is a game where I think they, you know, we sort of have talked about Keenan Allen and the loss of Keenan Allen in the last couple of weeks, but this is one where I think having his loss and not even being able to use him as a decoy on Patrick Surtain, just Mike Williams could not get open at all. Obviously, you know, there will be some controversy on the overtime ball that probably was a catch if you go back and review that one, but just never able to consistently get much separation out on Patrick Surtain at all. Shut down that side of the field. Obviously, all of the other combined issues really started to show. So I think this is really an amalgamation of all the other Chargers offensive issues we had seen through the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But the Chargers finally weren't playing the Texans defense. They finally weren't playing the Browns defense. And they finally played a really legit unit that caused them these problems, that has, the playmakers that Denver has in Patrick Surtain and Bradley Chubb and all these guys. So for me, definitely an uneven game. I think you can go to Herbert, Lombardi, the injuries, and you just kind of hope it gets better at this point. But for an offense that's been trying to find its footing and looked like it had found its footing for a bit, it just feels like whenever they go against a top 10 unit, particularly a unit that does have a really good secondary like the Broncos do have, it's just really hard for the Chargers to consistently create, much offense.
Yeah, so the Broncos before this game at least were second in defensive EPA per play if you include the games that happened before Monday Night Football. The Chargers will play the San Francisco 49ers, who are first in that category, in a couple of weeks, and the Rams on New Year's Day. But otherwise, it's mostly smooth sailing the rest of the way, including the game against the Seahawks, where they are 30th, right behind the Browns. So I think things will look up eventually. But yeah, people are saying in the chat too, that's a tough defense.
It is absolutely a tough defense. I mean, we talked about this unit being a unit that would give this Chargers offense a lot of problems because they're great against the run. They have Patrick Surtain, and what the Chargers have been doing the last couple of weeks is using the run game to their advantage, targeting Mike Williams very heavily to move the chains, and those two things play into the Broncos' strength. So there were definitely a lot of issues, right? Like it just felt like a snowball game because Herbert wasn't as sharp as he's been, right? Like whatever we all think about Justin Herbert, we all love him, right? And we think he's a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the league, but this was not a good day for him. And there were some drop issues, and Trey Pipkins was clearly not even close to 100% healthy in this game. And Will Clapp finds out that he's starting essentially this morning in place of Corey Linsley, and then Joshua Kelly gets injured, and then it was just a snowball effect of a game for the offense, and it felt like it was the offense from the first couple of games, but at least this one was against a legitimately good defense. So I think obviously you have to hope that this unit up front gets healthier. I don't expect Corey Linsley to have a fever next week. He should theoretically be back. Keenan Allen should theoretically be back next week, so it should get better. The Seahawks are not great on defense, so it just felt like the Chargers kind of folded on offense, and we're not really used to seeing Justin Herbert just have like no answers for whatever the defense is throwing at him.
Yeah, I think things will get sorted out. I mean, if you look at like the Green Bay Packers scoring 17.8 points per game, they've just consistently been bad and unable to move and get things sorted out all year because of, they don't miss Adams because he's hurt, but Adams isn't there. There's injuries, there's offensive line issues, and then if Rodgers isn't on, they don't look good. So the Chargers kind of have a lot more peaks than that. I would say as many valleys, or not as many valleys, because they've been better, but certainly have more higher moments there. So I think things will get figured out with Keenan Allen, with Corey Linsley. But man, like I'm almost willing to say that Corey Linsley is like the second most important player on this team, because with him, without him, two completely different offenses.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just want to say I think it was the MIBPJ guy on Twitter who had posted that the Chargers were like first or second in the league when like Corey Linsley does play in terms of EPA per play, and then they're like bottom of the league when he doesn't. So I mean, just that stat in particular is goes back to Tyler's point. I mean, Corey Linsley is super important, as was Rashawn Slater, prior to him getting hurt, as was, really every key cog of this offensive line before it kind of became what it is now. Trey Pipkins clearly not 100% and probably shouldn't have been out there tonight if the Chargers had reasonable depth and backups.
Yes.
But I mean, then he, had to go out there, and obviously the offensive line and the state it's in is going to be a storyline, I think, going forward. This is probably the toughest game, I guess, maybe until San Francisco, in terms of, what the Chargers will encounter on a defensive line. for at least a while here. But that was definitely rough to watch, and you just hope that, obviously at some point in long term that Slater may be able to come back this season, but just that they can get Lindsley back. Filer starts playing better, because Filer was pretty rough tonight again. And at this point, Pipkins is hurt, and it's just Zion Johnson did not have the best game either with all those holding penalties. And so, just a really tough effort and a really tough night for an offensive line that was really tested by that Denver defensive line, which is what we expected. And I do think things will get better against, that Seattle defense next week, but definitely a rough game from the offensive line and just everything that was happening at the line of scrimmage as a whole.
Yeah, there were a lot of people in my mentions tonight saying like, 2020 Trey Pipkins is back. It's like the guy's playing through a sprained MCL on his inside plant leg. And, going up against a speed rusher like Baron Browning, who weighs like 230 pounds, probably soaking wet, you have to be able to get quick off the ball. And he just clearly was not able to do that. I felt like there were also a couple of times in which Justin could have stepped up and he didn't. So it was not a great day from the offensive line. I mean, the rushing numbers are not terrible, but they're not nearly as good as what we've seen, obviously, the last couple of weeks. So, offensive line, not great tonight. I will say, Sony Michel had some really good runs tonight and kind of saved the Chargers on 2 or 3 occasions. So, I guess if you want to point to a bright spot on offense, I guess you could talk about Sony Michel. There were a couple instances in which he had some really good reps in pass protection as well. So, they just did enough to survive this game, and they came out with a win. And obviously, that's what's most important. Again, hopefully next week you get a little healthier and bounce back against the Seahawks.
Yeah, shout out Sony Michel, man. Listen, Joshua Kelly got 1 touch and then he was hurt, or 2 touches, whatever it was, and that was it. And Sony Michel came in. The numbers don't look great at 3.5 yards per carry, but that dude deserves a game ball for 4 hard runs to convert, I would say. I don't know how many first downs he ended up with, but there were some tough runs where, they needed 1 and he got 1.1, but it was just enough for the Chargers. Really, really solid from him. And if that's his role, if Joshua Kelly is still the more dynamic back, and he is, but if Michel can just get you something difficult every now and then, great. That's solid. With that said, would still love Isaiah Spiller.
Yeah. I thought this was a decent bounce back game for Sony Michel, if you want to say it that way, especially, playing that role in a pinch like he had to. Most of us expected Joshua Kelly to be out there. Obviously, then he gets hurt. So I think Sony Michel did his thing. We'll say future 4th and 2 plays, I want Austin Eckler on the field instead of Sony Michel. Don't know why that was a thing at one point in this game, but I did think Sony Michel's effort was there tonight.
I think that particular time, Eckler would finish the rest of the game, so he's fine. But I believe he kind of limped at one point back to the huddle. I believe 2 plays or so later that was when Michel was in. But I think they had an injury timeout for somebody else. So I would have thought Eckler would be in there at that point, but I don't know.
Yeah, there was also a play I want to say in the middle of the 4th quarter where him and Jonas Griffith kind of got face to face a little bit. It was a hard hit. I thought it was clean, but it was a hard hit, and you could tell he was a little bit shaken up. So again, offensively, not a ton to talk about in terms of positivity. We talked about Donald Parham having a good game. I thought I don't know if he got injured or what, but you could kind of tell later in the 3rd quarter into the 4th quarter that they kind of just really went heavy on 11 personnel. And again, that's something that I wish they would have kind of gotten back to. I don't know if Donald Parham was injured again, like I said. But this 11 personnel with Josh Palmer, Mike Williams, and DeAndre Carter and Gerald Everett, it's just so clunky. And I understand, those are the guys that you trust. Those are the veterans that you can rely upon. But when Mike Williams is getting blanketed, it was a clunky unit. And I wish they would have kind of, shifted things a little bit more frequently from a personnel package standpoint.
So Jason Moore was active. Yeah, he was in the game. Michael Bandy was active. Richard Rodgers was not. And they did everything they could to take Trey McKitty off the field, it seemed.
Yeah, they went to Bandy early too. I think he was the 4th down conversion. And then I swear I like never saw him again after that. And same thing for Jason Moore. Jason Moore blocked a couple times early in the game, and then like that was it. So again, like we've talked about this with Joe Lombardi, like whenever things get tough, like what he does is 11 personnel and stick and screens and swing passes and RPOs. It was not a pretty game for him.
No, not at all. And regarding Parham, I thought he did get hurt as well. And I really don't remember seeing him after that as well. Not that he's a high volume, high target sort of guy, so it's not like I see him a lot anyway. But I think there was that one play he was down, and I was like, "Oh my God, Donald Parham again on primetime." But yeah, we'll see. Some guys definitely played through more injuries than they let on. That's for sure.
Daniel Popper tweeted out that Corey Linsley officially missed today's game with food poisoning. That's a hell of a bout with food poisoning, man. That knocks you out of 3 days of practice and games. Whatever he ate, don't ever eat that again.
Wow, really?
That's what Staley said in his press conference, I guess.
Food poisoning? What'd that dude eat, man? You got.
He said he had. I thought Brandon Staley said he had a fever. I know Alex tweeted the skeptical face.
Oh,
earlier.
this is such bullshit. It's such bullshit. Dude, it's the fucking knee. He had tendonitis and he missed a game and he missed a half. Like, at what point, like, the story keeps changing. It's fever, then it's food poisoning. Maybe this really is, like, something crazy that happened. But, like, I don't know, man. Like, because we talked about it even when he did come back. Like, you can't load manage like tendonitis. Like this is something that's going to be with Corey Linsley for the rest of his career.
Sorry, Alex. For our audio audience, Tyler put a live comment in here from SoCal Slime that says Corey ate the funeral potatoes. Honestly, would not surprise me if that's what happened.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like this is just, I don't know. I don't believe it at this point that this was a fever food poisoning situation. Would be surprised if that was the case. I think I don't know. Like it just feels weird, and we've had a history of like the Chargers like saying it's one thing and then it becoming another. Brian Bulaga, kind of a very famous example of that.
Justin Jones
alongside the offensive line. Justin Jones, Mike Pouncey, right? The list kind of goes on. So for me, I don't know. I definitely think this is a storyline that's going to go throughout the year, and I don't know if I really buy that it's food poisoning.
Put that back on the screen.
I love that our viewers are giving some callback things here. I appreciate you guys. This is great.
Somebody watched our Q&A on Sunday night.
Whiz.
Shout out to Alden. That's hilarious. Yeah, I don't know. Like one of my favorite things about Brandon Staley has always been that he like actually talks at the press conferences, right? Just tell us the truth, man. Like just tell us that, hey, Corey Linsley has food poisoning, and then we'll be like, okay, we understand. Not he has a fever, and then it's a 24-hour thing, and then downgrade him to questionable, and then he's out. So I don't know. Like I've had food poisoning, and it's not fun, and I get it, but just I don't know. Maybe Corey didn't want him to say that he had food poisoning, but just as like Alex is saying, is strange. I don't know. I'm surprised no one's asked him about JC yet.
That's because they won,
or at least nobody is tweeting about it.
Oh, you mean in the
presser? Yeah,
that wasn't the first question.
Nobody's tweeted about it. The Corey Linsley thing is the only update from any of the media members, and it was only Daniel Popper and Lindsey Theory.
Do they go into press conferences knowing they can't ask about a specific thing?
I mean, they were really like after Brandon Staley when Justin Herbert got injured against the Chiefs and against the Jaguars. So I don't know why JC would be off limits here.
I guess we'll find out. That certainly would have been my second question after how are you?
Probably would have been my first question tonight.
Yeah. I don't know. Everyone's asking about JC. So I don't think he played in the second half, right? Like he did not
see
the field.
No, it was Michael Davis from the jump, pretty much. Before we get in there, I do want we've had a few super chats today.
Okay.
That I want to shout out so I can scroll back down and like see the live comments again. Michael Hodges, he says Hopkins is a fucking dog. Game balls to Hopkins, tranquil in our defense for carrying the offense. Also worried with our team without Lindsley and KA on the field. Obviously, we've talked about a lot of that. We'll see what happens with Dustin Hopkins, man. I mean, whenever a player says I felt a pop, I don't feel great about his short-term future, but we'll see. Definitely powering through. That injury deserves him some shout outs for sure. And then there was, unless you guys had something to say there was another one from Zach Pearson.
Yeah, as far as Hopkins goes, that was the best kicker performance I've seen since I think Badgley 2018 Ravens, where he had to go like 4 for 4 on field goals. The Chargers would not have won that game. Outside of one blocked field goal, he was excellent that game. But yeah, Hopkins, man, way to go. I was getting emotional a bit. I also felt okay about that kick too. Like even though he was on one leg, I was like, okay, I feel kind of good about this. That Mike Williams, I know he did nothing pretty much the entire game. That last connection was so huge. I think Hopkins would have hit it anyway, but boy, did that make a difference. 39 versus 48 or whatever it was. Huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach Pearson, he said, appreciate you guys analyzing the game this late at night. Especially Alex, man. I don't think people realize that it's 12:30 p.m. right now where Alex is at. And in a few weeks here, we're going to be on 4.
Oh, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse from here. So please do not put any of these other games up when it's 2 a.m., Brandon Staley. Please. I need better efforts than this.
At least make them good games. But definitely, he says he wants to see the tight ends use a little bit more. And I agree with that. I think, like, I really like the way that Donald Parham was playing. Again, I would love some clarity there. But the way that Gerald Everett was used tonight was rather frustrating to me after what he did in the first few games.
Yeah, he clearly was their, up until week 4, their best receiving option that they had, including Mike Williams. And then they just, they continue to feed Mike Williams, which is totally fine. But they've kind of just ignored Gerald Everett the last 2 weeks, including this game. And it's a surprise for sure. And it's to the point where Herbert, Everett is standing in the middle of the field on a 4th down, and Herbert is just looking elsewhere. I don't know what happened. I don't know why you go away from Everett, because it's not like the pick 6 happened in week 2 and they just went away from him because they couldn't trust him or something. No, they continued to feed him after that. So I don't know really what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, a weird situation as a whole, especially because, I mean, it just felt like last year Jared Cook was a really frequent target, even in spots where he shouldn't have been after dropping the ball. So, I mean, seeing Donald Parham get involved in this game and then just kind of not, clearly after he probably was injured. But yeah, just it doesn't feel like there's ever been a consistent force in the tight end room really at any point this year.
Yeah, I thought there was another one that I missed.
I can keep sorting through them if you want me to just find them for you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, then let me go backwards then. Okay, first of all, shout out my mom. Thank you. Love you. Okay, from Brad Carr. What's up, fellas? My first super chat. Do you think there's anything to take away from Derwin mouthing at Staley? People keep saying this in the chat. I missed it. So if
I didn't see it either.
Was this when they had to call timeout because there wasn't enough people on the field to defend the punt? I want to say that's what happened.
I didn't see. It didn't register in my brain as something to pay attention to. So if there's something else, let us know.
I wouldn't put much stock into that. I mean, Brandon Staley and Derwin James are arguably like the 2 closest members of staff and player. Brandon Staley loves Derwin James, so I wouldn't put too much into that other than it just kind of being a heat of the moment thing.
Maybe he tweeted, "WTF are we doing?"
I wonder what Keenan was thinking tonight on the sideline watching that game.
Did they go for it? Oh, they did go for it on 4th down. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Which I thought was absolutely the right call in 100%. The second half, but I thought Justin had Gerald Everett, and I don't hate going after Damari Mathis either. It's poor execution for sure. So I thought that was the right call. I would love to look at the play again to see how exactly Gerald ever got open, but yeah, I'm fine with that sequence for sure.
Yeah.
Vanessa and Hunter, shout out. He says the defense really looked better without JC Jackson. Not worried about the offense without Keenan and a good Broncos D. Yeah, I think like we said, the offense should certainly bounce back next week with Corey and Keenan back in the lineup, especially Keenan Allen.
Yeah, we'll see how much he's actually back. But yeah, no, Keenan Allen back solves several issues for this team. So
Adrian said that Staley was blaming JC for the coverages, was not supposed to get help over the top before the half, and was supposed to be deep third on a touchdown. It was not a good look.
No, not at all.
JC at all.
No. And that's what it looked like on the play too, is that like Derwin's, kind of just running back to try to get to Hamler and is like, what the fuck just happened? And so that was a pretty big miscommunication. Yeah. And then obviously JC is kind of the culprit there. So I don't know. And obviously then you have the touchdown the Broncos got in this game. So yeah, I don't know what you do with the JC situation going forward. It's going to be very interesting to see how they deal with it, especially after how Michael Davis played tonight. But like, man, that's going to be a story throughout the rest of the year. Like Steven said.
That's what changed it for me too, is Michael Davis, because I was at a point where, okay, like if Nasir Adderley's out of position and JC's out of position, and even in some moments Derwin's out of position, that's a coaching issue, right? And I think, sure, that's definitely part of it. But then Michael Davis steps onto the field and is like, oh yeah, no, I got this, and everything was fine the rest of the way. So is it a coaching issue? I'm not ready to crown Michael Davis. I'm not ready to trash JC Jackson. Like, Michael Davis played a half, and we've seen him as a starter as well. I like Michael Davis a lot. I would love to see him on the field, but not ready to crown him yet. But things just everything changed with Michael Davis on the field. And if all it is Michael Davis gives up, 4 catches for 45 yards a game, but it's not, 1 for 60.
Yeah.
You got to roll with that maybe.
Yeah. And, we saw Nasir Adderley get benched, and it kind of worked. Like, he played pretty well tonight. He certainly did not give up any big plays. I thought he had a couple good plays. So it looked a little bit more like 2021 Nasir Adderley. So we'll see. Maybe this is the wake-up call that JC Jackson needed, right? I wish that he wouldn't have put himself in that situation. But again, like, they need him. Like, the best version of this Chargers defense involves JC Jackson playing at his best. So I think they kind of have to give him another chance next week. I don't know what you're able to do with this situation. And again, maybe you bench him next week, but then you have to you probably have to make him a healthy scratch, because you need that other spot for special teams, because Michael Davis is a starting gunner. He's on all of the special teams units. Like, you can't just have JC Jackson just not play at all. And like, what are you going to do? Put that 5-year, $100 million contract on special teams? So I don't know. It's a dicey situation for sure.
No, and I mean they have to play him next week, right? Because as Steven just said, like, the best version of this defense involves JC Jackson playing at his best. And really the, I guess, bummer part about tonight in terms of the JC Jackson performance is, like, he's very clearly, like, not hurt. Like, at this point, in terms of recovering from that injury, you could point to a couple things in the Cleveland game and be like, oh, he was a little slow here, gets beat by Cooper on the route here, but like, this game, it was just all mental in terms of, like, just not knowing where he was supposed to be, not being comfortable with this defense, and then in addition, maybe being a step slow in that regard. But yeah, I think that's just the disappointment with this JC performance, and knowing he's not hurt. It's not like you can put him on IR for 4 weeks and just say, okay, here's Michael Davis till, like, JC gets his head straight. You can't really do that. So, I mean, he's going to have to play. I mean, look, the Chargers pay him $16 million a year or whatever it is, right? You've paid him to be CB1, and you kind of have to pay him until it works, right? And so for me, or at least play him until it works. So for me, you got to have JC Jackson in there. And then just, obviously, could the leash get a little bit shorter in some of these games, especially like as the Chargers are a contending team. And Brandon Staley has not been afraid to yank guys before. Michael Davis very much knows what that feels like in previous years. And he wasn't afraid to yank JC Jackson tonight. He wasn't afraid to yank Nasir Adderley, obviously, last week. And so, yeah, I think that at this point, you know, the leash is probably shorter for JC in some of these games if it's as bad as tonight, but you have to play them.
Yeah, a lot of yanking. Victor Alir asks, any concern about Herbert? Maybe the ribs flared up. When you can't hit that Hail Mary and you're 10 yards short of the end zone, something tells me that not great so far. Not perfect.
Yeah, he wasn't sharp tonight. I think the Broncos were doing a lot of things to get to him. And again, the offensive line was banged up. You couldn't get any separation. So sometimes you just have those kind of games where everything kind of feels like it's closing in on you as a quarterback. And I feel like that's what happened. So, yeah, I'm not concerned. Like, I think the one thing about Justin Herbert that we can always generally bank on is that he's going to follow up a poor showing with a really good showing. And I think he proved that last year, the year before that anytime that, you know, he came out and kind of struggled, he was going to come back the next week and have himself a day. So, and getting the Seahawks next week should absolutely help. Max Vega asking about the muffed punt situation. I kept on waiting for a flag to be thrown. I was like, wait, that shouldn't be a thing. But I guess, like, technically it's not a penalty if you use the blocker to cause a fumble. So I don't know if there's anything more technical. I don't know if I'm misinterpreting the rule because I did look it up. Somebody, Broncos fans, tweeted it, of course.
Yeah.
But it looks like to me that it was a legal play by Joshua Taylor. And if it is, very heads up play.
Well, I think it was because the receiver, ran into the blocker there. So then that's why it wasn't. If Joshua Taylor had directly interfered with the returner or the fielder in that case, then it would have been a penalty. But otherwise, it's not, which is, weird rules that don't make sense in the NFL part 257. But
Yeah, I was waiting for a flag on the Asante Samuel Jr. pass. Well,
100%.
it wasn't interference. Well, it was, but it wasn't. And then on that one, live, I thought, oh my God, John Taylor just blew into this guy. But no, I mean, it's legal, I guess. Yes, I just said that, whatever.
Speaking of flags, what the fuck is roughing the passer?
Dude, that Morgan Fox penalty was just atrocious.
The Morgan Fox one, even the Broncos one that they got on Justin Herbert, like it just felt like the whole game. It was just weird. I don't know, and obviously some of the flags, it was just a flag fest the entire game. But yeah, I don't know. Roughing the passer, it continues to be one of those things that I just. At this point, like what is roughing the passer and what are you allowed to do? Because there are times that like Drew Tranquil came in like a little bit violently and I'm like, ooh, are they gonna call it?
Yes. I thought the one at the end of the end of the fourth quarter, I was like, oh, that's gonna be roughing.
Yeah,
he went
it's like, oh, did he invade Russell Wilson's personal space a little bit too hard that time? Like, and even the Jerry Tillery one where he like hit Russell Wilson in the helmet, I was like, ooh, are they going to call that hands to the face? They're going to call that he invaded his personal space? Like, I don't know. So just very weirdly officiated. And that's been now roughing the passer has been all year, particularly if your name is Tom Brady also. But yeah.
Yeah. My thing with tonight specifically, it was like they were really ticky-tacky at certain moments. And then they were like, okay, we're going to let Patrick Surtain and Mike Williams just mug each other on another instance. And Michael Bandy like clearly got interfered with, but it was like, okay, well, they're just kind of going at it. And then there were other ones that were just like so ticky-tacky on both sides. The rest were bad on both sides for sure.
Yeah.
So that to me is always the most frustrating thing. Like if you're going to be ticky-tacky the whole game. If you're going to let them play the whole game. You can't sit there and mix and match on roughing the passers and pass interferences, especially pass interferences, because there's spot fouls in the NFL. You're talking about 40-yard penalties. So it was frustrating to watch. And that really added to the frustration of the whole game because both offenses were really bad. And like the best plays of the whole game for either side were pass interference calls.
Yeah. And it just felt like the whole night, it was like, okay, well, we got that call wrong, so we're gonna get a call wrong now to make up for it. And like that just kind of happened for both teams tonight, which is just weird.
And somebody else was saying Brandon Staley apparently buried JC Jackson at the end of the press conference. So definitely gonna have to go back and watch that one.
Interesting. Well, I guess
yeah.
that speaks to, you know, the rumors that he treats star players a certain way. I guess it's also good to show that you'll flame your star corner if he's not playing so hot.
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty critical of, or at least in the offseason, we're pretty critical of Brandon Staley not being able to, you know, or not being willing to make these kind of adjustments. And I mean, he benched Nas, he's benched JC Jackson. So, you know, he's certainly not afraid to make these kind of decisions at this point, which I think is overall a good thing. But obviously, JC Jackson, that kind of situation is just, it's a little different than not choosing Storm Norton or not choosing Nasir Adderley.
Yeah.
Okay, lefty top tens. Do Chargers need? We're gonna keep getting these questions, so we'll take a few more and then we'll kind of move on here. Do the Chargers need to add receiver depth? I think they do, but I think they're gonna wait until Keenan Allen is back to see what it looks like.
Yeah. I mean, they do, but they've been comfortable rolling out with Josh Palmer and DeAndre Carter. And as long as they're comfortable doing that, I don't know. Like, I just didn't see a lot from Josh Palmer tonight. Didn't see a lot from DeAndre Carter outside of like the one conversion he got. So, I mean, theoretically, right, you're not playing Patrick Surtain again until the next time you play Patrick Surtain. So you should have at least both sides of the field open. Then you're getting Keenan Allen back. You're getting Mike Williams back. But, I mean, this is just going to be the thing for the rest of the season, right? Is like how easy could it be for Keenan Allen to re-aggravate that hamstring? Then if Keenan Allen re-aggravates that hamstring, then what are you going to do, right? And the Chargers have just kind of played this whole situation like, okay, Keenan's coming back, and he very well might, and maybe he just plays like the wide receiver one that we all expect, you know, and that we've seen in previous seasons. But I think the Chargers also at some point need to start preparing for a potential reality where this goes wrong for them. And they need to make some kind of move, whether that's a trade, whether that's a signing, whether that's just, you know, getting more guys that can immediately contribute than just having Mike Williams on one side of the field and then all of the other wide receivers kind of just struggle to get into the picture for the rest of the game. I mean, Michael Bandy's like a nice story, calling him up from the practice squad. So was Jason Moore, but like at some point, you know, if this Keenan Allen thing isn't resolved and if the wide receivers behind Mike Williams continue to kind of look like they have, it's definitely a question.
Oh, yeah. God, please, yes. Elijah Moore. If he's available, I can't even tell you. I would immediately buy that jersey. I loved Elijah Moore. The numbers were so good for him his rookie year, too, like per play basis. And just like he doesn't seem like he wants to be there and they don't want to use him or whatever. My God, I would die if they got Elijah Moore to play their slot. Oh, my gosh. I would punt Palmer to the sun.
That would be fun, man. I mean, like we wanted them to draft him, so I mean, he's the perfect guy there for sure. There were some other super chats that you know, we'll get to those. You know, something about JC Jackson and kind of the future there. So we'll get to JC a little bit more once we have some more information on him throughout the week. Before we get to kind of our game balls and wrapping up the show, I did want to say, apparently, when the Chargers were introducing the Broncos, they put a clown emoji face over Melvin Gordon's face before the game. Yeah, so Melvin Gordon was asked about it afterwards. He says his feelings were hurt a little bit, and it sucked that he wasn't able to do anything about it afterwards. So I don't know if that actually happened, but Melvin Gordon said it did. So I don't know if anybody who is listening was at the game, if you can confirm that Melvin Gordon got a clown put on his face before the game. But yeah, that happened, and I wanted to bring that up.
That's kind of hilarious, but also pretty. If that happened, that's messed up. Like, I get it, and it is easy, but it's low hanging fruit with Melvin Gordon. Like it's just Melvin Gordon sucks. And listen, it is a bit comical where in 4 weeks he fumbled 4 times, and we're saying, oh my god, here we go again. But I just talked about that game against the Ravens where we needed Michael Badgley. They also needed Melvin Gordon that game, who had to really dog it out through an injury, I believe, that game, and help carry that team. So there are moments where Melvin Gordon did fight for this team, and I really hope that did not happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, at this point, we're pretty far removed from like Melvin Gordon being on this team. Like
in 3 years.
3 years ago. I mean, yeah, like there will obviously be Chargers fans that have like feelings on Melvin Gordon, for good reasons in terms of how that whole situation played out. Then again, I mean, when Carson Wentz comes back to Philadelphia this year, he is going to get ridiculed the shit out of him. So I can't speak too hard on that because.
But you expect that from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Some fans can be pretty brutal. But just weird to continue to do it to Melvin Gordon, I guess, who has been gone for a while, and like just I don't know, especially after he got benched tonight. Like I don't know, like he's not that player anymore.
Junior says it was a lookalike cam. I don't know. The tweet that I saw from an NFL Network reporter said that it was before the game, like they were introducing the Broncos, I guess, or whatever, and it was him. So I don't know. Tyler, are you listening to something about that or something different?
No, someone tagged us in what Staley was saying about JC. I don't see where, unless I didn't get tagged in the whole thing, I don't see where Staley is mad and flaming JC and stuff like that. But he's certainly short of words and assigning blame to JC for the 2 big plays.
Yeah, I don't think it's really Brandon Staley's style to just like throw somebody under the bus like that.
Nah.
I mean, he's had other opportunities to throw his players under the bus. Like he could have thrown Nas under the bus several times this season for those big plays, and he never did. So, oh yeah, Lindsay Theory just tweeted this out. Justin Herbert had 57 pass attempts, no touchdowns, most in NFL history for a win. So hey, we're a part of a weird stat for a change, in a good way, as opposed to a bad way.
Nice. It was the midges last week, 57 passes in the win this week. Yeah, someone said no passes past 15 yards. I think Parham's was Yak. But they did say like he was like 1 of 9 or something on throws past 15 yards or whatever. I forget what that ended up being, but couldn't get anything going.
Yeah, and there were like 7 pass interference penalties in there too. So
yeah, true.
I don't know. But yeah, almost 60 pass attempts tonight. I'm not crazy about that at all.
No.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this show up with hopefully some more positive takes here. So we'll give out some of our usual game balls to some deserving players. We'll see what kind of happens. Tyler, we'll start with you, man. Who's your game ball of the night?
We'll definitely have to look at where these stats ended up, but considering Russell Wilson had only 188 yards, and it felt like more than half of that was from JC Jackson, I do want to give a game ball to Bryce Callahan, who continues to be a top 10 player on this team so far through the entire season. I don't think he's allowed more than 21 yards in any game this year. He's currently only allowed 75 on the year through 5 games, through Chris Harris Jr.'s first 5 games last year, 200 and something yards. So there's a clear upgrade there. He had 2 tackles for loss, or contributed to 1 that someone else cleaned up, and then a tackle for loss on another screen. I would imagine he gave up maybe 20 something yards again this game. Looked really good there. Looked good against screens as well. I know like that's not what the game ball most people thought of, but to me, I think Bryce Callahan deserves a lot of credit for being a really steadying force for this team, especially after watching Chris Harris Jr. last year.
Yeah, Bryce Callahan was fantastic tonight again. And, especially considering what happened with the JC situation, throwing Michael Davis in just to have a stabilizing force, in the slot like he has been is really good. I'm actually going to say what most people are saying in the chat, because you can go just Dustin Hopkins, but J.K. Scott, I think, deserves a game ball as well. Certainly did not think that he would be kicking, out of the end zone touchbacks when this game started,
sure.
and he had to take over, right? So for me, I think that both of them deserve credit. Dustin Hopkins, obviously, for making 4 field goals in a wild game where something happened to him and there was a pop. So I mean, Dustin Hopkins definitely deserves the game ball, but I just think we talked about special teams as a whole. And I think Dustin Hopkins and J.K. Scott sort of just collaborating the way they did the whole game, and managing the kicking game the way they did, for me is the game ball.
J.K. Scott, I will say, he had one of the worst punts I've ever seen.
That first punt was awful, man.
One of the worst things I've ever seen. But from there, really like kickoffs, amazing.
Oh yeah. He did also have the pretty good punt in overtime as well. But yeah, no, that first punt, if J.K. Scott didn't do the kick and touchback stuff, yeah, he would not be getting a game ball. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah, Thomas points this out. I do hope Pat McAfee and his crew talk about Dustin Hopkins tomorrow. Should be fun. Maybe get him on the show. That'd be cool. Get some kicker love. I think those two are obviously well deserving. I mean, J.K. Scott coming in and handling kickoffs was he did a really good job there. I was nervous to see what he would look like as a kicker, because when he was trying to warm up, it was not a pretty sight. So obviously, shout out to Dustin Hopkins for sure. I would imagine he got an actual game ball as well. I'm going to give a game ball to Drue Tranquill, man. I thought that this was arguably his best game of his career, maybe since his rookie year when he was playing also the Denver Broncos with like his second or third career start. Obviously Dulcich had like the one big play, and so did their other tight end had the one big play early. But we didn't really see them go to the tight ends much after that. And I think Drue Tranquill was a big part of that. There were 2 or 3 times where he was covering, I want to say like number 2 or number 3 for Russell Wilson in terms of reads. And he wasn't like, he was blanketing them. And so Russ had to either scramble or throw the ball away. So coverage wise, I thought Drue Tranquill was fantastic. And if you just did that, I would have said like, hey man, really good game. But then you add in what he was able to do as a pass rusher, as the blitzer, and also as a run defender. So I think this was Drue Tranquill's best game, and the Chargers needed every second of it. So I think Drew absolutely deserves a game ball for tonight.
Yes, absolutely. That's a career-defining game for him. Without him, they do not win this game. Huge game from him. Because I started to get a little sad watching Kaiser White ball out on prime time. But Drue Tranquill, man, he really stepped up.
Yeah. And I mentioned him earlier in the show, but I think one has to just still go to Michael Davis as well for what he did this game, coming in for J.C. Jackson in that chaotic situation, limiting Cortland Sutton like he did. I will say the J.K. Scott warm-ups did not look great, but nothing will ever top Drew Kaiser against the Cowboys.
No, when he missed
that nothing will ever top that.
I have to say, if Hopkins ever gets hurt in a game, Justin Herbert was a kicker in high school. Like, let's go. Let's make that happen. I'm ready for that.
Sure.
Quick shout out to the director in here for the chat, doing some great things over there on YouTube as well. So definitely go check him out. I think I played him in the Chargers content fantasy football recently, and he kicked my ass. So shout out to the director, man. Appreciate the support tonight.
Muchas gracias.
Somebody said thoughts about trading for Bryce Hall. I mean, the Chargers have too many cornerbacks right now.
I was gonna say, doesn't he play slot? Does he play outside?
He was outside last year. He is playing the slot for them this year, and it's not looking great. So, but yeah, if you're gonna trade for a Jet, trade for the receiver that is unhappy,
or like Michael Carter if they don't want to use him.
Yeah, Michael Carter. Yeah, that works too. Absolutely,
all the Carters. Who else? I mean, I guess Khalil Mack. There's a lot of players deserve game balls, honestly. It was a really solid performance all around.
Yeah. I mean, Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson continue to do really good things. I thought that both of them had some fantastic moments tonight against the run, against, is it Lloyd Cushenberry? So both of them were really good. So already been at here for an hour and 5 minutes. So we'll wrap up tonight's show. Appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Had a great crowd, great super chat. So thank you for that. Alex, final thoughts before we head out for the evening.
Thank God that's over. Let's go beat Seattle, please.
There we go. Short and sweet. I appreciate it. Tyler, what's up, man? Final thoughts here.
Let's ride.
Well done. Well done. Yeah, I guess my final thoughts here are, much needed performance from the defense. We needed to see them kind of put together a performance like this. It wasn't a complete game by any means, but they got after the passer. They did some good things in coverage, stopped the run at a pretty good rate. So hopefully this is a sign of things to come for this defense. Brandon Staley, obviously, as a defensive mind, has a lot riding on the rest of this season and fixing this defense. So again, hopefully they are able to get right soon. So an ugly win is still a win, and that's the bottom line. Chargers 4-2, taking on the Seahawks next week, and then they get a much needed bye week where they can get some rest and get healthy. So we'll have you guys covered there. We're going to be going live on Wednesday for our preview opportunity of the Seattle Seahawks game. Looking forward to that. So that's going to do it for us tonight, guys, and we'll see you then.